Hi, Daria.
Hello.
Um, yeah, sorry if there was any confusion about the time, but time zones are crazy. It's just very hard to bless your heart. Are you up in the middle of the night or something, or
Oh, no, that's okay.
is
It's
it late?
no, that's fine. It's almost 11 p.m.
Oh, okay. See, I'm not a night person. I couldn't do that. But anyway, listen, I appreciate what you're doing very much. You know, when I responded to you, I think not long ago, I remember I was a little bit concerned because it's just as you probably know, the USA is in meltdown, but the whole world is in many ways, which you're very aware of, I'm sure. Listen, would you like to go ahead and start this, or do you want to discuss anything else first, or?
No, I think we can start.
Okay. Okay. I printed out your questions, and I thought about them. Um, and, of course, what I like to say is that I don't have answers, but I have responses, because answers are too simple. I mean, it's not, the whole subject isn't easy. Anyway, do you want to start officially? Are you going to edit this yourself?
Uh, I think we can just start with the questions.
Okay, do you want to read the questions aloud, each one, or?
Yes, sure. I'm gonna read the question.
Okay, yeah, just read one at a time and let me respond. Is that going to work?
Yes, sure.
Okay, because I could probably go on for hours about this, but we won't make it too long.
All right.
Attention
I,
span these
I
days,
understand. These questions are really hard to answer in 5 minutes. So
yes, they are. They are.
yeah. What do you think causes military conflicts in the world today?
Um, well, I think that the question goes on to talk about corporations and the greed. I think that what's really going on has deep roots in what we call colonialism. And the history of colonialism, goes back to about 500 years ago in Europe that I'm talking about. Of course, you can talk about other kinds of historical interpretations. And I think that Western Europe developed a kind of colonialism all around the world that was really very dangerous and destructive, because what it did was it started to treat people as commodities, and in fact, it turned into slavery. And they began to value natural resources over human lives too, and taking charge of natural resources by conquering countries. For example, India and China were just major examples of this, but all around the world. And I think that what's happened that is very strange now is that the United States, the USA where I live, began as a colony of the UK. And after World War II, when Americans thought of themselves as victorious, uh, we began to behave more and more like an imperial colonial power ourselves. And I think that the UK and much of Europe and also Australia, for example, are now behaving as colonies of the USA. And that we have this very, very twisted concept that we must be the only superpower and dominate the world. But I think fortunately this is starting to break down now. So anyway, go ahead with your question if you like. Um,
Does it have anything to do with corporations that profit from wars? For example, the international investment company BlackRock has already bought up part of the territory of Ukraine, and after the end of the military conflict, will be able to take their land and resources at an even lower cost. What do you think about this?
You know, Daria, I don't know specifically about the matter of BlackRock owning parts of Ukraine. I don't know that specific one situation, but I do know that for example, here in the United States, there are several major corporations and perhaps others that profit hugely. I mean, this is not just billions of dollars. Over the years, not too many years, it's actually trillions of dollars. It's just inconceivable amount of money. Lockheed Martin is one of them, and Boeing is another, and Raytheon. And I do think that what's interesting, to answer your question as succinctly as I can, and just a few brief statements here, is that this country where I live, which we have many privileges, we are the richest country in the world, and yet we are no longer a democracy. We have become a plutocracy, which you may understand. The plutocracy means it's governed by the super rich. They are the people with the power, and they have bought our government. And our government, particularly since the Vietnam War, we have launched numerous campaigns of war, and we have not won a single one. I don't think anyone really wins a war. So, you know, when we talk about things like Ukraine or Vietnam or you know, Israel and Palestine, I can't take sides. I really can't, because we have to just stop waging war, in my opinion. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. Today, there are a huge number of hotbeds of instability in the world. How do you think it is possible to influence political elites around the world and prevent new wars in the future?
You know, I think that this is very frustrating for an individual like you or me who cares about peace and cares about people. What is really important to understand, I think, is that peace is not a passive surrender. Peace is not doing nothing. Peace is a dynamic condition of being profoundly alive and committed to survival of quality of life. And it is, I think, very difficult to think about influencing political elites. I think that the people need to rise up, and I would never advocate violent revolution, but there is so much propaganda and conditioning that comes from, like, our government. The media is almost all owned by these corporations. When I refer to the plutocracy, the super rich people own the media, and they control the information that a lot of people see, and this determines what a lot of people believe about what's going on. So you have to be very proactive. One thing you can do is to be extremely careful about what sources you trust of information. You know, I don't watch television news here in the United States, which a lot of people do, but if you watch that, you will not understand what's really going on. You know, for right now, it'll just be all automatically, you know, pro-Israel. And I cannot take sides, but I think that the world is, I don't know that any individual can prevent the political elites from doing what they do, but public opinion around the world is turning against Israel and the United States now, because people are aware of the slaughter of, particularly of, Palestinian children. This is a reality. You know, I know this is the kind of thing some people don't want to hear about, but it's happening. So I don't know that any of us can take on as individuals to change the policies, but I do think that movements of mass protest are now happening. The biggest protests that have ever happened in the United States, you know, which the media ignores to the largest extent here. But if you look through the internet, you can find a lot more about what's really going on. And think about it, Daria. Now with I don't use a mobile phone myself, like unlike most people, but you can take pictures of things and record things. So it's a lot harder for people to get away with lies about, what happened, because things are recorded. So I don't know. Everybody just has to pay attention and do whatever we can. You're doing something, which I admire, appreciate. So
Thank you. Yeah, I agree about your opinion actually about the social media, and even here in Russia, I also don't watch TV.
good. It's
Um,
not a source, is it? It's not a good source anywhere.
I don't really have time for it even. So,
Yeah, I understand.
how do you think the conflict between Palestine and Israel? Oh, I'm sorry, it's the fourth question, but we can start with that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's all right.
how do you think the conflict between Palestine and Israel can be resolved?
Well, again, I think that public opinion is turning against the slaughter of the civilian children. I think that what's happening too is a lot of people are, I don't think most people are stupid and most people are not bad. And I think that people are realizing that the fanatical government is not going to make the people of Israel safer this way. It's going to make things worse. All the Arab countries have turned against Israel. Many of them were starting to communicate more with Israel. That's just, those doors are shut now. So I don't have, this is one of those questions, Daria, where I can't say I have an answer. I don't, to how it can be ended. But I do think that public opinion is turning against what they are doing, and I've always been kind of an idealist. During the Vietnam War, I could be your grandfather, and I turned against war during the Vietnam War when the United States was waging what I consider, a futile and unjust war there. So I am hoping, this is something that I'm really hoping turns out to be true. I think that true evil self-destructs, true human evil eventually. The question is, will we survive long enough to avoid the problem with the Middle East right now too, that I think a lot of people are waking up to, is the possibility of a nuclear war, nuclear holocaust. That's something many people just don't understand any longer. When I was a young kid, when I was your age, you're quite young. I think many people understood better that, if a nuclear war starts, it's all over, for humanity and the planet. I mean, nobody's going to survive it. But and that seems unthinkable and extreme, but it is. We really need to avoid that. So I don't have an answer how to end that conflict, but it must be resolved.
There are frequent rumors in the media that Biden and the US Democratic Party are sponsored by military corporations. Do you think this is true?
Yes. Yes, I do. And I don't think I think there's a lot of evidence. It's more than just rumor too here in the United States. I think the sad thing about Mr. Biden is that he has always been a warmonger. He was very enthusiastic about the war in Iraq, and the general public, a lot of us here in the United States understood when it was announced that we were going to invade Iraq, that this was absurd. For one thing, we understood that it had nothing to do with the attack, the terrorist attack in New York. That the people who did that were not Iraq, and they were probably not in Iraq even. But I think that Mr. Biden supported that fully, and I don't think he's ever recanted it. But he's part of a trend in our government which doesn't even want negotiation, you know? I mean, this is true in other wars, like in Ukraine and the Palestine-Israel war. They actually, the State Department actually tells people they cannot use the word ceasefire. And I think what's really sad, this is Mr. Biden's administration. They say that if you say humanitarian pause, that's allowed now, but you can't say ceasefire, which is really absurd. A humanitarian pause means you might help a little bit of assistance to get in there, and then you'll resume the slaughter. It's just, you know, it's not. Anyway, yes, I do think that Mr. Biden is completely in the control of the and it's the plutocracy generally. You know, it's the super rich and it's the military industrial complex.
All right.
Yeah.
In the end of our interview, what would be your message to people who want peace and harmony on planet Earth?
Okay, yeah, you know, this is an important issue, and I just have several thoughts on it. One thing that people say that I think is very valuable and meaningful is that peace begins within each one of us. But to make peace inside yourself in itself is not going to help the world a great deal. It's not going to help the big picture that much. You know, of course, it's meaningful, it's powerful. But there is an incredible performer and singer called Patti Smith. She has a song called People Have the Power. And I think that this is what gives me some hope for the future. Because people do have the power, but what she's talking about is that people have the real power. But the problem is all that conditioning and propaganda we talked about makes people feel helpless, like they don't have any power, you know? And I don't agree with that. But I think that one thing that is also hopeful is that we are starting to wake up to the fact that the worst problems in the world are caused by what is called the patriarchy. And the patriarchy is kind of a trendy term that I don't really think is as clear as simply saying we still live to a large extent, Daria, in a male-dominant world, you know? Most of the bosses and the majority of the political leaders are men. And my hope for the future is that a lot of those old men are going to die off soon. You know, I hope so. I'm not thinking about any one person. I'm wishing anybody, you know, misfortune. But those old men who are clinging to power, they have to go, and time will take them. And I think that when we have more women in positions of power, and as the young people begin to take over, I'm not sure what age you are. That doesn't matter. You're quite a bit younger than me. But I believe in the young people. I have a beautiful, intelligent niece who's a young adult, you know, and I have two nephews who are, you know, young men in their 30s. And they feel that we have ruined the world, that they should inherit to a large extent. But I also know that they understand better than many of the older people, Daria, what's really going on, you know? And I think that peace is something we have to learn to wage peace, and in terms of creating peace, just as we wage war because we think that's going to help or solve a problem. It doesn't. Nobody ever really wins a war in the long run, you know? I mean, World War II, yeah. You know, there was a monster, Adolf Hitler, who had to be taken care of. But what's happened is that the state of Israel, they're starting to act, you know, I guess I shouldn't say, I don't want to alienate any of your audience, but you know, when there's also a saying that if you fight a monster, if you really fight a monster, what you have to do is be careful not to turn into that monster. You know, so I really believe we have to live according to the message I would give people is there's a saying, don't resist evil, but do good instead. You know, because if you fight evil, in a way, you give your energy and your power and your attention to it, you know. I mean, there's an ex-president here in this country who's just a monster, you know, and I can't stand to see his face or hear his voice. And he gets a lot of attention from the media because that's what he loves, you know. But I think it's best to avoid giving attention and energy to that. So if you live by don't resist evil, but do good instead, that means, doesn't mean you just allow anything to happen and you do good. It means that what you really need to put your energy into is doing the good you know you can do and do it. You know, you're doing something really good, and I admire that. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your great, wonderful, with full of sense message to people. And thank you for voicing your opinions.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. You bet. Bye-bye.
Take care.